Welcome to Gospel Tangents, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I am Rick Bennett. I'm excited to have one of my first female priesthood holders on the show. Well, I guess I've had a few, but we're going to get deep in with Deb Luce. Now, in the LDS Church, we would call her a patriarch, but as a member of the community of Christ, obviously she's female, so that doesn't really apply. They've changed the term to evangelist. So we're going to learn more about Deb, her miraculous healing, and her conversion to the community of Christ. So you won't want to miss this conversation. Check it out. Welcome to Gospel Tangents. I am so excited to have, I'm going to call you a female patriarch. Can I say that?
I don't care. Call me whatever you want.
So tell us who you are and where we are.
I am Deb Luce, and I'm attending the World Conference for the Community of Christ Church in Independence, Missouri with Rick.
That's right. So Deb, she's a stalwart. We have these Monday night Book of Mormon conferences on Zoom, and she's there. So I feel like I've known her for a long time, but we've only met twice in person.
Yeah, for sure.
So in LDS parlance, we would call her a patriarch, but of course she's female. So I know I've joked with you before and said, I want to call you a matriarch. And you said, no, that makes me sound too old.
It does. And I'm getting there on my own without that title. So yeah, we're all evangelists now.
That's right. So evangelist is the title now.
Yes.
And so a lot of times, so I'm a little curious, because we go broad in the Restoration. I know Josh Gailey is an evangelist. Mm-hmm. Normally, when we think of evangelists, we think of like missionary work, but LDS think of patriarchs and patriarchal blessings. Do you do missionary work, or is it more?
No, we leave that up blessings? To the 70s.
And you more probably so, don't even.
We do. We all kind of, it's all ministry in one way or another, but we're not so much the missionary portion of it. No, we're ministers of presence in the congregation and throughout the mission centers where we reside or wherever God sends us. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, cool. So your home is in Iowa.
Yes, Comanche, Iowa. Big whopping town of about 7,000 people. It's where I grew up.
Okay.
And so yeah, it's right on the Mississippi River where the point of Iowa comes out the farthest. That's where we are.
We went to lunch yesterday, and I learned something very interesting. You got married. You got married as young as a Mormon does.
Yeah.
I only thought Mormons got married young like that.
Well, it was actually, I graduated high school in May of 1978. And 2 weeks later, I married my husband, Roy, who was 15 years older than me at the time.
Wow, that's a big gap.
It was just kind of one of those things, when the Lord, I wasn't expecting, and I wasn't even asking the Lord's guidance in this decision in any way, but we were blessed with 36 years and 2 wonderful sons, and it was a great ride, yeah.
Wow. So he passed away recently?
Actually, he passed away. It'll be 10 years in September.
Oh, it's been 10 years.
October.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's a long time to be without your husband.
It is. But, I had a really interesting experience with that. My father had passed away in September of 2012.
Okay.
And I inherited the family home, because I was the only one of us kids that lived in Iowa. And so I inherited the home, and I was staying in the home, and I was going through some pictures, and the Lord said to me, I was in the kitchen, and I heard a voice. I attribute it to the Lord. To me, it was an audible voice, and nobody will ever convince me otherwise. I was in the house all by myself, and I was told that my husband wouldn't be with me much longer.
Oh, wow.
And this was in April of 2013. And I'd been going through photo albums of my parents, and so I was already a little bit emotional and crying, going over things, and it was like, God, I can't deal with this too. Please, I just can't deal with this. And at the same time I was told that he wouldn't be with me very long in this place, I was going to be okay. He was going to take care of me. And so I left that experience thinking, did I really hear that voice? And if I did, I can't tell anybody because then they'll think I'm crazy. But I clung to that for for a long time, and I still do, knowing that, life is different than what we had anticipated it was going to be, but God's been with me the whole time.
Wow,
And
that's cool.
He's blessed me abundantly.
Wow. So let's go back even farther. I think you said you grew up Methodist?
I was baptized as a baby
As
when
Methodist.
I was as a Methodist.
Oh, okay.
But my family, I don't really recall having attended church,
Okay.
when I was little.
Well, Joseph liked the Methodist, so it
Yeah.
can't be all bad.
Yeah. And then when I was in middle school, a family moved in next door to me, and they were part of the Reorganized Latter-day Saint Church. And they had a daughter who was my age, and we became best friends, and we are still best friends today. We attended the communion service with me today.
Nice.
And she lives in Louisville, Kentucky now. And we became friends. I attended youth camps and family camps, and then they moved away, and I hung out a little bit at the church, but not as much as I had previously. And then when I met my husband, then I left all churches because he wasn't a church attendee of any kind. And so I just kind of wandered around for a couple years. And then when I was 21, I'd heard that the pastor of the church in the Community of Christ where I had attended had passed away. And I thought, one of those remorseful guilt trip type things. I should have been baptized while he was still alive. And so I decided to be baptized, and I was in January, and it was the first and only time that year I went to church. So I joined the church, but I didn't follow Christ, if that makes sense.
Oh, okay.
I didn't have the
You
right
just went
reason.
to church the one and only time that year when you
Yep,
were
that was
21,
the
so
one
you'd
and
been
only.
married for 3 years.
Yeah.
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 Wow.
Yeah. And then our son was born the following year, and then that's what prompted me to get back into the church and getting involved.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Well, cool. I know one of the interesting things that you told me yesterday was you were in 1984. Obviously, is a big year in the Community of Christ. That was the year that Revelation was. How do I say that? Was it ratified, or how do you? Because you guys do things really different than we do.
Yeah, it was approved. They brought the resolution before the conference, and the resolution was approved as being the will of God, and so that then becomes doctrine for the church.
And you said that you were the only you and I think one other person were the only two people in your ward branch.
Well, in the congregation where we were attending, there was just a couple of us that were actually in favor of it, and so there wasn't really conflict, but it was disagreement.
Were you seen as uppity?
No, I wasn't seen as uppity, but I was seen as you don't want to go there, type thing that. This is what we believe, and this is what we're going to, stick by, and not necessarily start running around and ordaining women. But things change. People learn, and it initially there may have been some kind of threatened by somebody else's, not in a negative, not in a malicious way, but. So once you find out that they're not really evil, and we're all just people, right? God calls all of us. We all have different gifts, and so.
Well, and it's one of those things, in a small branch of 50 people, you need everybody, right?
Oh yeah.
And so why couldn't a woman lead a branch like that?
Right.
And
well, and the unique thing is that the majority of the work that got done, and the majority of decisions that were made by people who just didn't have the title, so, and they were leaders in the congregation, but they didn't perceive themselves as priesthood, as being called to be in the priesthood.
Yeah.
So,
can you talk a little bit more about that? Was it really contentious then?
well, like I say, not really contentious and malicious. There wasn't outright arguments and stuff like that. People just had their views of it, at least where I was, and you were either for it or you were against it, and you just didn't, proclaim, if you will, where you were at or where you stood. And so in 1984, that was when I had my car accident that I talked to you about.
Well, yeah, we need to go there.
Yeah.
Not that we like car accidents, but
the Lord I have been in 2 car accidents in my entire life. I was at fault on both.
Oh.
But I was the only one injured, thankfully. But both of them were miraculous, transforming things for my life. And the one in 1984 was in this community. Roy had been transferred with his job. And so he was a workaholic, bless his soul. He took good care of us. And he was working construction about 80 to 100 hours a week. And I was at home with our son Joshua, and Roy was working, and I was feeling kind of lonely away from my family and in a town of people that I really didn't know, long ways from home, 4 hours away from where I grew up. And I was coming home in the afternoon, and it's a 4-lane road, but there was a car that was turning left in the left-hand lane, and I was behind a pickup truck with a topper on it, and he was going slower, so I moved into the left lane to go around him, and I ran right into the rear end of the car that was stopped, making the left-hand turn, and I wasn't buckled in.
Oh,
I
no.
hadn't used my seatbelt, and so I went into the windshield with my face, and my chest hit the steering wheel, my knees went into the dashboard, and I was a mess. My glasses had made a severe cut across my forehead and into my eyebrow, and it was not a pretty sight. And some good Samaritan came to my car window and immediately started applying pressure to my forehead. And I was more concerned about my son, who was locked in his car seat in the back seat, that somebody was either going to take him or that he was hurt. And I was taken to the hospital, and I couldn't move my legs. I had internal injuries, but they didn't know, exactly the extent of them, and they needed to find where the injury was. And of course, my face was just a mess. And they just kept. They'd take part
How
of
old was your son at the time?
He was about 2, a little over 2.
So he doesn't really remember any of this.
No. And so they just take part of the bandages off of my forehead and put other additional ones on to try to get the bleeding to stop. And so when the doctors came in, they were talking to us about, it was pretty severe injuries. And it happened to be, this is where the miracle starts. The guy who was the chaplain on call at the hospital was an elder in the Community of Christ Church.
Oh, nice.
And he was one of the most outgoing guys, and he turned into be a man who the Lord used to become my adopted dad.
Oh.
But Ray, his name was Ray Holloway, wonderful man, and he came and he was with me in the emergency room the whole time.
Did you know him beforehand?
I knew him, but
not very well.
Yeah, I'd met him at church on Sundays, but didn't really know him that well, no. And so he stayed with me the entire time in the emergency room, and if he wasn't with me because I was doing things, then he was in the waiting room with Roy, Roy wasn't a member of the church at that point in time, wasn't attending church really. And so Ray says to me, he asked me if I wanted to be administered to. Sacrament of administration is a big thing in the church, but I didn't really know about it that much because I just joined the church. I wasn't really a practicing member. And it was like, okay, yeah, I suppose. And so
you refer to like the anointing with oil as a sacrament.
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. And so, normally the elders will place their hands on your head and they anoint your head with oil. And he I remember him leaning down. I was in the emergency room on the table, and because of my injuries, he couldn't get to my head. He couldn't place his hands on my head. I was laying flat on this gurney thing, and he leaned down and he says, "I don't know if this will work. I've never had to do this way." And he placed 2 fingers with oil on my cheek right here.
Oh, interesting.
And as soon as he did, there was the Spirit it moved. I get goosebumps now because it just was a warm sensation. And it started in my head, and I felt it all the way out to my toes. Wasn't a zapping thing. It was just a very gentle, warm, comforting thing. And within 5 minutes, when they were doing the pricks on my toes, to get sensation, I was able to feel it. And
so you hadn't felt your toes before?
Couldn't move my legs, couldn't move, things. And the internal injuries, they never found why I was bleeding internally, but the bag that, that had been, determining whatever, was clearing up. And so they took me into surgery, and I was in surgery like 7 or 8 hours.
Oh my goodness.
For my face. And the guy that did it was a plastic surgeon.
Oh, good.
And it was a real blessing, because when the next day when I was out of surgery, he had come and said I'd probably have to have a couple more reconstructive surgeries to repair the damage,
Wow.
And I never had anything else done after that.
Oh, you're kidding.
No.
That's
and
awesome.
I spent a week in the hospital.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, then Ray, the minister, he had been talking to my husband all throughout the night. And they had some good conversations, but Roy, told him he needed to change some things in his life, and he was going to do that. And then I got home from the hospital, and Roy went back to working 80 to all those hours. And the next week after that, it was 2 weeks after I got out of the hospital, Roy called, and he says, "I'm on my way home." And I said, "Okay." He says, "My arm's turning blue. I think I need to go to the doctor."
Uh-oh.
So he came home, and we took him to the doctor, and he had a blood clot, and they admitted him to the hospital immediately and put him on blood thinners.
Oh, you're kidding.
And so he was flat on his back then too. The Lord kind of got his attention. And so I was still really just so excited that God had blessed me through that sacrament. I was healed. Nobody will ever convince me otherwise. I know I was healed. I was there. and so I convinced Roy. I said, let the elders come and anoint you and see what happens. And so the elders came. Ray was one of the elders that came, and another guy came who turned out to be one of our good friends. And they administered to him, and within a couple of hours, the blood clot was gone, and they discharged him. They told him he'd be there 2 or 3 days, and he was out in less than 24 hours. So
wow.
It's amazing. And so, God, like I say, it's just amazing.
Wow, that's really cool. Patrick McKay, I interviewed him a while back. I'm trying to remember what the name of his book is. But I told him he should rename it The Book of Miracles, because it's full of stories just like you said.
Yeah, I've got that one. Yeah, he presented that, I think.
Do you remember the name of his book?
It has, no, I don't.
I can't remember it. I don't know why.
Yeah, it's on the head of my bed.
But it's full of miracles, and it's cool because, I think a lot of us LDS, we're think that we have the sole possession of miracles, but clearly everybody experiences them.
Yeah. Everybody does. We can't put God in a box.
We try to.
We do. All too often, we do.
Yeah. So that led to Roy's conversion as well? Is that what happened?
That led to his conversion, and he was ordained to the office of elder. I don't know, maybe 4 years after he joined the church.
Now, do you guys progress from deacon to teacher, priest, or anything?
No.
He just went. They just ordered straight to elder.
Everybody's called according to their gifts.
Okay.
And their talents, and it's a process that goes through your pastor, usually the presiding pastor in the congregation. They discern it, or the Lord tells them this person has a calling to this office. and it's the teachers, deacons, priests, and elders that the pastor can call, and then they complete the necessary paperwork to forward on to the mission center presidents or president, and then that jurisdiction, discusses it and prayerfully considers it, and then if they feel that it's from God, then the ordination is set, and training takes place with various temple school courses that we have, and then.
So do you have to take classes in order to be ordained?
Yes, there are courses through it's called temple school. There are various courses. They have them on all of the different offices.
That's through Graceland University?
No, these are, it's actually called the temple school.
Oh, okay.
And it's classes just designed, you don't get college credit or anything for them, but there's like ministry and the sacraments, and then there's the ministry of each individual office and what the responsibilities are and the various ways that people can serve in the ministry. And then the offices of high priest and evangelist and bishop, those are from higher levels in the church. Those are processed through the higher offices, and then it comes before World Church.
Now, do you have a big distinction between Aaronic and Melchizedek priesthood, or is it just priesthood?
They have, the deacons, priests, and teachers are of the Aaronic order, and then the elders and the bishops and all those guys are the Melchizedek.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So we still have.
So how soon after 84 was a big year for you personally and a big year for the church.
Yeah.
And so how soon after that 84, was that April of 84 or October?
August was when my accident was.
Oh, okay. So April's when the conference was.
Mm-hmm.
August, you have this accident.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to recover from that accident, would you say?
Oh, it didn't take me long at all.
Oh, really?
No, because I was healed.
Wow.
I spent a week in the hospital. But
even after you got home, you still probably had some aches and pains, I bet, a little bit.
Maybe, but I don't remember them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And so when your husband had the blood clot, you were taking care of him?
Yeah,
basically?
A little bit, yeah. And then he was home for a few days, and then Joshua, of course. Actually, the night of my accident, some people in the church took Joshua from the hospital because the policeman had taken Josh to the hospital. He was fine.
Yeah.
No problem. And so one of the families from church had taken him to be with them. And then my parents were notified, and they came down that night, and they got Josh and then took him back home to Iowa, or back home to Comanche, and kept him for a week or so. So I didn't have to worry about Josh, taking care of him right after the accident. So I guess I did get a break for a week or so. But yeah.
Wow. So how soon after the accident did you get ordained?
It was 1991.
Oh, so it was 7 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I had moved to a different congregation.
Okay.
Roy had transferred with his company. And so we went to...
Did they call him to the... So he got baptized in 84?
I don't know for sure which year he got baptized. It might have been probably closer to 85.
85?
Yeah, in 85.
And so then they made him an elder pretty quickly?
Within a couple years.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we moved to Pekin, Illinois in 87. I was expecting our second son.
Okay.
And he was transferred with his job. And so we moved to a different congregation, a different district, and became active in the congregation there. And I was called to the office of priest.
Okay.
And served part of the ministry of the priest is working with families. And so I enjoyed it.
It's not just blessing the sacrament on Sunday, huh?
No, or preparing them. Nope. It was fun. It was a good time. It was a wonderful congregation. They had probably 80 people, and lots of a whole bunch of the whole age spectrum, from little tiny babies to elderly, and everybody got along so well together. It was just a wonderful family. They just loved us into the congregation. It was a wonderful thing.
Now, in our Doctrine and Covenants, I believe it's section 20. Is it section 20 is yours as well, where it says the duties of a priest are to exhort, expound?
I think they're the same one, yes.
I think they are.
Yeah.
And so because
I don't like to
expound. In the early 1900s, we went from ordaining adults to the Aaronic priesthood to young boys. And it has the preach, expound, exhort, and, I can't remember all the things, cry repentance on the people or something like that. And we think about that, and we don't have little boys do that. I mean, I think when in our church, when my son just turned 14, he's a teacher. He's a teacher who doesn't teach. He gets the sacrament ready on Sunday. That's like his main thing to do. But I know that a teacher's job is to exhort, expound, and that sort of a thing. But it sounds like you guys really follow the Doctrine and Covenants, and we don't really. Would you agree with that?
Well, I can't speak for your church because I don't know that much about it, but we do. They try to implement the offices, and they try to practice the offices that they have. The deacon, I know for a lot of years in our church, they they're the maintenance person. Well, that's not really correct. I mean, they're the person who takes care of the congregation's comfort. They take care of the congregation, the church, the facility. And that's their calling, and it's their gift. And when you see a deacon truly at work, it's just a wonderful ministry that they offer. And each of the Aaronic ministries, each office, whether Melchizedek or Aaronic, they're just awesome when they're applied the way that they're supposed to be.
And so you were ordained a priest in 1991, and so you were visiting people in their homes, and tell us more about that.
You go on visits, and you develop relationships so that you know what's happening in the lives of other people, and unfortunately, that was 1991, so that's a long time ago. Things have changed, societies have changed, and people. Are more busy and not, they don't have the time necessarily to devote to certain relationship building. So the ability isn't always there to get into the homes to visit families. Because, kids, Sunday is the main day for athletic activities now, it seems. So oftentimes you don't even see families in church on Sunday. Or mom and dad are both working, and they're working multiple shifts, and then the kids got school activities afterwards. So there's no time for people to come to your house and sit down and learn to know about each other, which it's a real disadvantage in today's society, I think. Yeah. I think it's one of the things that we're lacking. We need to get back to relationship building and spending time with each other in the present moment. Put our phones down, which is really hard to do.
They're addicting.
I'm telling my granddaughter, who's 16
they're just like
all
cigarettes.
the time.
They're addicting.
Yeah, put your phone down. But that's one thing that really hasn't helped in relationships, I don't think.
Huh. And so, because I know you later became a pastor, and so what was the transition from priest? I guess you, when you were a pastor, you were an elder, right? Is that right?
Yep. I was ordained. So my husband was transferred again.
Okay.
And I said, okay, if we're going back this close to home, which he was being transferred to the Quad Cities, which is like 40 minutes from Comanche. I said, if you're going back, we're transferring again. Now, what are the
Quad Cities for those of us who aren't islands?
The Quad Cities are Davenport and Bettendorf, Iowa, and Moline and Rock Island, Illinois, and they're joined by bridges.
Okay.
And so they call them the Quad Cities. And it's there's probably, 125,000 people maybe in the whole area, maybe a little bit more. Yeah. And so that's the big place to go.
It's not the tri-state area like on Phineas and Ferb.
No. And so I said, we'll move back to Comanche and you can commute, because it's not like a big commute. We have a 2-lane highway to get us back and forth. It's no big deal.
It was 40 minutes between Comanche and the Quad Cities?
Yeah,
okay.
Where Roy was working.
Okay.
And so we moved back to my home congregation.
Oh.
And
the same one that didn't like women to be ordained.
Yeah, well, they'd progressed. And it was when I was there, I'm not even exactly sure what year it was. We went through so many things. Joshua ended up being diagnosed with cancer in 1991 with pediatric melanoma.
Oh.
And that was just
really?
a couple. Yeah. He was like the second child that was diagnosed at Mayo Clinic in Rochester. It was just a whirlwind thing. But again, the Lord intervened, and we had him administered to, and we tracked. It was a long process. He had been born with a mole between his toes.
Oh, that's a strange place.
It really was, really strange. And I always worried about it, because it's a mole, it's cancer. And the doctor would always reassure me and say, everything's fine, everything's fine. So he was, I think, it was 1991, the year we moved back to Comanche. I talked to my doctor about it, and he's like, you have worried about this long enough. Let's just take it off and be done with it. Okay, so he goes.
So how old was he when they removed
10.
this? 10. Okay.
So he goes to the doctor, and they do a punch biopsy thing where they poked it and removed parts of this mole. It was about the size of a pencil eraser.
Pretty good size.
Yeah. And so first one comes back, it's fine, no problem. And it's like, okay, but they were going to have to, they took part of it, and then they sewed it up, and then they were going to do it again and, take part and sew it up and to work on it in small parts because of where it was.
So big. Oh, and
where it was. Yeah, but right between his toes. So the second biopsy, they do it, the second one, and the biopsy comes back, and they said it tested positive for melanoma. And it's like, well, I don't think so. It was fine before. So they referred us to the University of Iowa hospitals. Took them a couple weeks to get us an appointment to get in. And then it took them forever, like a week and a half, to get back to us on the results. And they said, well, we got good news. It's not cancer. How's that make you feel? Isn't that great?
So this is the third test now?
Yeah. And it's like, well, that doesn't make us feel good at all, because we've got one saying it is and one saying it ain't. Now we got to find out, is it or isn't it?
Just get it out of here.
And so my husband had family who had been seen at Mayo previously, so we went to Mayo Clinic. And we went up on, I don't know what day it was. I think it was a Monday. And Mayo's amazing. We went in on Monday, and they did all kinds of tests, did a whole 2 days worth of tests. And on Tuesday night, they came back and they said, it is cancer. We need to remove it. And it's like, okay, well, when we doing the surgery in the morning, it's like, holy cow.
Really?
And so again,
you weren't planning on that.
No, not at all. And so we called our church, and we let everybody in our congregation who notified all the other congregations, and they started praying for Josh, and we had the elders pray for him, and he was healed. He went through the surgery, and he was in the hospital 10 days. They took a skin graft from his thigh because they had to go up and around the top of his foot and over his toes and down into the bottom of his foot. It was kind of like
between his big toe and his second toe, basically. Is that where it was?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so
that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then he was in the hospital 10 days because of the skin graft. And
really?
Then, but we went back quite often the first 5 years, and then, every 6 months, and then once a year, and he's fine. He turns 41 tomorrow. So happy birthday, Josh. So
I just remembered Patrick McKay's book. It's Healing the Breach.
Yeah, there you go.
There we go.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with evangelist Deb Luce from the Community of Christ. In our next conversation, we'll talk about how her congregation reacted when she was called to be a pastor. They were the same group that didn't want ordination of women. So you were the pastor in 1996.
Yeah, around that I think it was.
And no pushback that you're a woman.
No. By then, it was.
All the conservatives had left.
I don't know about that, but it was more accepted. All of the bugs had kind of been worked out, and people were figuring out that
it's not the end of the world.
It's not the end of the world, and there are some blessings to be had by this, and we need to let God out of His box, and But yeah, it was pretty amazing.
Thanks for listening to Gospel Tangents. If you'd like to support me, please subscribe at gospeltangents.com or on patreon.com/gospeltangents, or you can watch entire videos at youtube.com/gospeltangents. I really can't do this without your support. I'd love to do it full time, and I need a lot more people that are willing to help me out. So I'd really appreciate that. So thanks again for listening, and don't forget to check out some of our other videos.